Kia ora, Rachel.
Kia ora. Mac, how are you?
Good. We're getting there. Not too early in the morning, which is good.
Nice.
So thank you very much for joining me for this conversation from Tauranga. It's really appreciated to have you have your time.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it and feel very humbled to be asked to be a part of this. So, thank you very much. Hopefully today I can provide some gems for anyone that might be listening. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty. So we'll kick it off with, so would you mind please starting with telling me a bit about what you know about Help Auckland and how you came to hear of us?
Totally. So Help Auckland, I know that Help Auckland are a education, prevention and support service for people that have experienced sexual harm, or rape, sexual violence. So however you would like to name it. So Help helps also the whānau of those people and the support network of those people. Help also have many other parts to it that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong. So there's in the education space, we've got, you've got, so we can help, we can keep safe. So that's for the young tamariki in the early childhood education sector. And from what I believe, that is just around understanding the body, what the parts of the body are called, and safe touching. And just learning things around, if you don't want to hug someone, you don't need to hug someone, and that kind of thing. So age appropriate education. Also, I know of Dear M, which is a advocacy support or advocacy group, and I love following Dear M on Instagram. I find their content is really cool. Just real basic, straight to the point. What is consent? And they go out and do talks at like the university, and they can get booked for schools, and just teaching people around certain topics like healthy relationships, consent, education, where to go for help, and that kind of thing. And I came to hear of Help, I guess, because I work in the field of sexual harm and also as a registered social worker. So we kind of get to know everyone not everyone, but we get to know the main sort of services that are in the motu in Aotearoa. And so, that's pretty much how I came to hear of Help. And
did you want to add anything on consent law reform? Because I know that you're quite passionate about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the consent law reform, so for those who may be aware, recently there's been a petition that was presented as an oral submission to the Justice sector of Parliament, and this was done and led by Labour Zubir, and I'm so sorry if I've said your name wrong, Labour, but I'm so incredibly inspired by her. So basically the consent law is completely outdated. So I think it's like 1961. And there's so many flaws in the consent law. So what we know in the consent law in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is that it says what consent isn't, but it doesn't say what consent is. And what we're seeing in the courts is that this is massive. It re-traumatizes victims and also leaves a grey area for perpetrators to, I don't say get off, but to not be held accountable for their actions. So basically what consent law reform is asking for is the definition of consent. There is no definition of consent in the law that reflects in the law. Yes, the jury will get told usually, hopefully, at the start of a trial, what is consent, but that doesn't reflect in the law. Also the age for consent. So what we do believe is that it's 16, but that does not reflect in the law either. So there's all those grey areas there. And then also the notion of reasonable belief, because they didn't push me away or they didn't fight back. So what we do know for people who experience sexual harm is that there's so many different responses we have. And it's like anything in a situation that brings on adrenaline or in a survival mode. We have fight, flight or freeze. And what we see with people that are coming to our sexual harm services for support is that quite often they freeze. And so in that moment, when they freeze, it's just to get through that moment of sexual assault or rape. And therefore, the perpetrator, that there was consent. So that's kind of the part that is a grey area that needs to change in our law. Another part which I actually looked into was New South Wales in Australia. So last year in June 2022, they looked at their consent law, and in June 2020, a person will not have a reasonable belief that there is consent unless they have done or asked something to make sure. So therefore, it doesn't just place the responsibility on one person, because what we know is consent is a mutual agreement, right? So how can we engage in an act when only one person is kind of into it, you know what I mean? So this way, it then places more emphasis on the person, the perpetrator, or hopefully there's no perpetrator, but in terms of consent, just to make sure that consent was given not only by verbal, but by physical. So if someone's frozen, clearly there's no consent there. There needs to be an enthusiastic yes with, body language that would say that they're into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, ask. That's simple. Yeah. Just go, hey, are you into this or you're not, Yeah.
100% affirmative consent before the act. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely where it's blurred at the moment.
Yeah.
Why do you think that free specialised support services for survivors of sexual abuse and their whānau are important?
Yeah, so I think that free services should be accessible for all people, no matter what socioeconomic background that they have. And we also know from research that sexual harm does impact the person's mental, spiritual, physical well-being, and that can result in the survivor being at higher risk of poverty, addiction, and other mental health disorders. So therefore, free access for the person and or their whānau, their family, is a human right in my eyes. People should be able to live a life free from mental health if it can be prevented, especially. We should also have access to health services, and that is a human right to have the access to services to help us be well. And also, I don't think anyone that is a victim survivor should have to pay to get, therapy for something that's happened to them. We also have government funding in terms of, ACC and that, and also, so many things there for people to get that support that they deserve. Also, it might take years for someone to realise too that they are a victim or survivor of sexual harm. So I know with Labour giving her spiel, or her speech, at the oral submission, it wasn't for a year or two that she realised that she'd been sexually harmed. And same for me too, which I'll talk more about soon. But not only that, but people also aren't always ready to get help at that time. That may be due to shame for the family, cultural barriers that prevent them from getting help then and there when they're a child, perhaps. It may just not be their time. So just because someone gets raped or sexually assaulted, say today, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to access help many years down the track. But also it doesn't mean that they're ready to go and get that help right now. Sometimes people have to process it. But also at the same time too, I think people, when they think of sexual assault or rape, they think that it's done by a stranger. But what we do know is that, over 70% of these acts are perpetrated by somebody that we know and we usually love and we trust. So this also means people that are in a relationship, so domestic relationships within the home as well. And the Domestic Protection Act only came in the 80s, early 80s, I think 1982, which then gave, people the right to be able to access protection orders. So, that's not even that long ago. So, so there's so many barriers to people accessing help straight away. And also, again, with the cost of it as well, people should have access to free support regardless. Yeah. The healing journey is long. So for some people, it's years and years and years. And also as well, we may think, okay, cool, I've done, 3 years of therapy. And then, down the track, something might happen and, trauma comes back up. So personally for me, so I didn't get therapy for my sexual trauma until my late 20s. So, and I was raped when I was, I don't know if it was 13 or 14, but that first year of college, for many, many reasons, which I'll talk about more later on as well. But it was 3 years of intensive therapy. So I got my PTSD diagnosis and went through ACC sensitive claims. So 3 years every week of deep therapy. And then this year I've had a few, things pop up because of things that I didn't know were going to happen.
Did you say
that,
3 days every week that you were having therapy?
sorry, 3 years once a week.
3 years once a week.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Sometimes more. And some weeks when I went, I'd just sleep. Like I was so exhausted because I was studying at the time too. And actually studying social work was what brought a lot of stuff up that I thought, oh, I don't, like I just swept it under the carpet and just thought, oh, I'll just get on with it, just carry on. There's no point kind of thing. So yeah, and then this year I've had some stuff come up out of my control that I'm a part of that has brought up a lot of trauma for me. So whether that's in my dreams, so probably re-engage with counselling again at some point, because it is an ongoing thing, and I think people that haven't experienced it themselves don't really understand the mental trauma, the spiritual trauma, and even the physical trauma that sexual harm has on someone, and also their family as well, especially if the person who's harmed that person is part of the family or their community. So yeah, so ongoing therapy is a need and a must. Yeah.
So this campaign may focus on our ongoing therapy support of childhood sexual abuse survivors and their families. So are there any specific comments you would like to make about the importance of these services?
For me, when I was, I don't even know how old I was. I must have been around between 8 to 10 age. And something happened to me by my step uncle. And I didn't really know how to articulate it. I didn't know how, I was too scared to, because I didn't want to upset the family. So, children hold on to that for so long. Even like, children that are babies that have sexual harm happen to them. Obviously, when you're that young and you're a baby, you can't either, one, you can't talk, two, you can't, you don't know, you're still trying to learn your life and what's going on. And that's a door, and that's, and relationships and stuff. And even though you're so young and you don't know at that stage, your body carries trauma. And so when you hit, primary school, and being a social worker in schools, I've seen it. And kids that have been sexually harmed very, very young then go into schools and have behavioural challenges. Not all, but many, many do. Like, get labelled with ADHD, or they might have whatever. But we see it. The body carries trauma. And so therefore, ongoing therapy for children sexual abuse survivors is another human right, I think, that we need to really look at. Yeah. We have a pandemic in New Zealand, I think, and the pandemic is sexual harm. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. It affects more people than I think anything else. The media focus on so much stuff, around ram raids and that. Yeah, that's absolutely like, moral panic or whatever. But this stuff here is a pandemic. Yeah, and it's getting worse.
The numbers of people that this affects versus, certain things like ram raids, and not just affects, it's like it can, depending, it's not the same for everyone. For some people, they might have more, might take more of a toll on them and those around them than others. But yeah, it's the sheer scale when that it's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 9 boys. It's like, and you look at a room, or if you look at a classroom, I'm sure it's just like, crap, like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why I sort of say to some of the youth, like when we give the statistics, I'm like, how many people are in this classroom? So I'm not saying everyone in this specific classroom, but on a number scale, like, 8 people in this class have been harmed. Well, not in this class, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, and when you put it into that perspective, people go, oh shit, okay. And not only that, but then you also think about the effects of the perpetrator's family. So not only have you got this, this victim survivor, and if they share with anyone what's happened to them, so you've got this mass scale here, but then you've got this other over here, and then there's intergenerational trauma. It's just continuous until, so.
It sounds like it's sort of all encompassing, especially, the impacts on the family as well. I think that sometimes something that's forgotten is just how much it doesn't just impact the person involved, but it's all of those around them as well.
Like and just the guilt and the shame that people hold as well, and I know for me with my mum, you know, she still holds guilt to this day, even though it wasn't her fault. But she has wishes that she had done more, or that she had been more, you know, like fought back more. But because the law didn't protect me, and the law actually victim blamed me, it was kind of like, oh, we just sort of move on, you know. So mum has a lot of guilt and shame there, which I always say to her, don't have that, mum. Like, it's all good, you know. So here I am today. Like, I don't, as much as that stuff was yuck for me, and, you know, caused so much pain through my life, I'm grateful today, because I've been in a privileged position to be able to heal and get to where I am, but it's given me this great gift of being able to help other people. Yeah.
Next question, Rachel. So yeah, I just wanted to see if you wouldn't mind please telling us a little bit about your story. So whatever you feel comfortable with sharing. So yeah, I guess so what's your personal experience with sexual abuse? And that doesn't have to just be your own. It could be stories of family, friends, or the community.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah, so my first incident was when I was probably in between the 8 to 10 age, and my step uncle, which I've only really just started talking about this more with my mum now. So yeah. So this is quite fresh for me to talk about as well, maybe in the last year or so. But yeah, I remember we were in the van, so he would look after me quite often. He was really cool. Like, he was really fun, step uncle. And he touched me like on my thigh, in my upper thigh, when we were in the van. We were like going to paintball. He'd take me out to do cool fun things like paintball and yeah, whatever. That's what I really remember. And so I remember feeling really, really uncomfortable, and I didn't want to tell anyone about it. So I told my stepsister, who was younger than me at the time. And so she told my mum and her husband at the time, so the brother of my step uncle, and his response was, if that's fucking, am I allowed to swear?
You're allowed to say.
If that's okay, so if
good.
that's fucking true, then I'm gonna cut his fucking balls off. And I didn't want that, because even though he did that, I didn't want any harm, or I didn't want, you know, I didn't want to cause a scene in our family. So I just said I was lying about it. So I just said I was lying, and kind of forgot, like, kind of just never got spoken about again. But mum said to me the other day, she thought something was weird, because for a while there, before I'd told my stepsister, whenever he'd come over, I'd hide from him. Like, I'd run off and I'd hide in my room, or I just got really awkward. And so mum always had a feeling something wasn't right. So yeah, she always, like I was talking about earlier with the guilt stuff, you know, she kind of was like, oh, didn't know how to go about it. So she has some guilt there. But again, mum, don't have any guilt. You are amazing. And mum, you're not the one that did anything wrong as well, by the way. So the second most predominant or profound incident for me was when I was first year of college. So I was going to a little rural high school, and when you're young, you know, you like to take risks. So I went to a party that I wasn't supposed to go to with some friends, and decided it would be a great idea to drink some Christoph vodka. I think it was like Red Label. And I drank quite a bit of that. And then that night I was raped by somebody that I knew. And because I'd had quite a bit to drink and I couldn't recollect the night properly. Oh, hang on. First of all, in the morning I woke up and I was naked, and I went to my friend's house and was like, this has just happened. So her parents took me to the police station to report it. Before my mum got to the police station, they put me in a room and they interrogated me, questioning me. So the law, again, this goes back to why consent law reform needs to be changed. They were saying to me, how do you know that you didn't consent? And we all know that you cannot consent when you're completely intoxicated. How did you know you didn't consent? Why were you out? You know, why were you drinking? So they did toxicology reports and things. They took my bloods and stuff, because I thought maybe I'd been spiked, because spiking and that was sort of new then. And then they just kept asking me. So mum turned up and lost it at them, and she was just like, how fucking dare you question my daughter without me here? You know, because when you're young, you don't know. You're just kind of like, oh. And the police kept saying to me, if you charge this guy, you're going to ruin his life. He's not going to be able to play rugby, because he was quite good at rugby. You know, how can you charge someone when you don't know the truth, because you can't remember because you were drunk? And so I freaked out and I said, no, I don't want to charge him. So I let it go, dropped the charges, and when I went back to school, I was severely beaten up by my group of friends because I was the slut who cried rape. So I still got a scar on my top lip from this beating that I got up there. So they beat me up with like a full Coke bottle, like this 1.5 litre bottles. And from that moment on, I just spiraled out of control and hated the law, hated people. We had to move towns, but when we moved cities, that news followed because it's a small country. So then I ended up in a fight at the school there. Then I got kicked out of school, and then I dropped out of school. Kind of broken together. And so, yeah, that was kind of my experience of being young, being raped, and not being protected by the law. And that is why I'm so passionate about prevention, because had we had education in schools, he may not have done what he did. I would have had more belief in myself and more confidence to say, nah, that was wrong. That was completely wrong. And would have been able to get the help that I needed at the time. So that's why I'm really, really passionate about this stuff.
And so something else that you've touched on, but so you've touched on the fact that you received therapy support for a few years, and just wondering, was there any other therapy support that you've received as well? And just wondering how all of that, the therapy has helped you with your recovery.
Yeah, so going way back, so when I was having issues during my youth, so mum got me into a private therapist, but I was very young then, and it was super expensive for my mum, and I don't think I was ready in my journey, and I hadn't actually spoken about what was going on for me at that point. I can't my timeline of my memory timeline is really, really muggy, so I can't remember if that was before or after the rape, but so there was that. So I started it there, but I wasn't quite ready. And then I started my ACC sensitive claim. So it actually came after a suicide attempt. So this was in 2017, maybe. And I just lost the plot. I was triggered by something and just lost my marbles. And then after that, I was like, okay, I need to get help. So that was what started the ACC sensitive claims process. And then that's kind of where that began, for 3 years with a lady here in Tauranga who is incredible. Yeah, so I've done that. I've been to a Reiki healer myself, so one in Tauranga as well, a male actually, but he was incredible. And then for me, in terms of therapy, but not like therapist, for me, just like my own kind of therapy is exercise and boxing. So I've gone back into boxing, which is a great outlet. So just exercise, and because part of my trauma from sexual harm, rape, was addiction. So I won't jump all over the show too much here, but so I need to have those endorphins and that hit of feeling alive. So doing extreme stuff for me is fun. Like I love risky kind of like I love skydiving. I've only skydived 3 times, can't remember. But those kind of things, like I need to feel alive. One thing I find really awesome, I'm not sure when it was brought in, but ACC sensitive claims now recognise things like miri miri, rongoa, te whare tapawha, te ao Māori kind of, therapies, which you don't have to be Māori to access, which is awesome, because I think a lot of us forget about those other aspects rather than therapy. We don't think about, all this holistic stuff, which is a massive part of healing as well. Yeah.
Nicely sort of ties into, so do you feel like you're in a better place now? I feel like you've kind of...
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel I'm in a better place. Like I said, I had my days, and my husband will definitely vouch for that. But I think we all have our days, regardless if we're a victim survivor or not. I mean, it's part of life. But definitely in a better place. And part of my healing has been able to give back to other people, or just walking beside them in their journey. And doing education in schools around consent is a passion of mine. I'm so happy to be back doing that.
So I feel like that kind of, so the the next question is, what is the status of sexual abuse in Aotearoa today? So like that could be like statistics or areas of sort of increased concern. Like there's been quite a bit about image-based abuse and ACC covering that now, which is
cool.
great,
That's good to know. Yeah.
And the support services that currently are or aren't available for survivors.
Cool. Yeah, great. So yeah, statistically we know that there's different statistics in different areas, but so I know it's 1 in 4 women by the age of 15 may be sexually assaulted, 1 in 7 boys by adulthood, and what we know is that men or boys are less likely to report it as well, and that comes back to gendered roles and stereotypes and what is a man, and many men feel that they can't voice this because of the shame and stuff like that. That's a whole other discussion and topic anyway. So what we do know as well is that the most vulnerable age and the most common target is age 16 to 24, so especially for young women. And in terms of our law and the whole process there, only 10 out of 100 are reported. 10 out of 100 cases of sexual harm are reported. Only 3 of those will get to court, and only 1 of those will get a conviction. And interestingly too, I was reading that it's more likely that a conviction will end if the victim is a male, which blew my mind. And I was like, okay, there we go. So yeah, but I also want to point out too that I think there's a lot of misconception and misunderstanding around if you are a victim of sexual harm, rape, you don't actually have to prosecute. You don't have to go through that avenue. You don't have to report it, but you can get support. Bless you.
Sorry, finally.
You have every right to access support to start your healing journey, and then maybe one day later down the track you might want to report it. So you do not have to report it. It's all confidential, obviously, unless you're a minor and there is concerns for your safety in your home or in someone else. Then obviously there'll be a bit of a difference there. So yeah, in terms of the ongoing concerns and increasing concerns, definitely image-based abuse. So image-based abuse, for those who are unaware of what that is, it's things like revenge porn or nudes or photos in general of that people will use to blackmail or manipulate, all that stuff. So using images of somebody without their consent online or with other people without their consent. So we're definitely seeing a lot of this in the schools and amongst our teens. So a lot of the time what we're seeing is airdropping, like on iPhones. So you can airdrop images to other people and you don't know who it's come from. And that's really hard to track. So there's a big issue there. So not only for people's nudes and stuff, but disturbing content. So that could be really disturbing for people that haven't consented to that. But yeah, in general, don't send that stuff if you don't consent. And what else is there in terms of rape culture? So rape culture, what we see is, we had a big flare up with the Andrew Tate stuff. That big so there were lots of youth in Tauranga debating that, being like, well, he said it's okay to do this and stuff. So rape culture is a massive concern, and rape culture basically is, say, for victim blaming. So, well, she was wearing that, so therefore she must be wanting that by being sex or being hit on. Also, other rape culture things is enhancing or upholding harmful stereotypes of gender. So, like, boys will be boys kind of thing. If a man whistles at a girl, that's a compliment. All those kind of things. So those are the big issues that we're having that continue to uphold unhealthy behaviours and beliefs, which then can lead on to sexual assault or rape. Yeah.
And so what changes would you like to see in the space? So that could be in terms of sexual abuse legislation, support services, or just like society's response.
For sure. Where do I begin with this one? So we need more men to stand up and challenge rape culture, to call out their mates when they're being inappropriate towards women, or even having like that locker room banter that we always talk about, you know, like, oh, I banged her last night, or oh, I'm gonna, you know, let's just see your tits and all that kind of stuff. That's really, really harmful because it continues to objectify women and place women in a lower power dynamic than men. We need to end the boys club. So I'm sick of the boys club crap of like, oh, I didn't know that was happening, or oh, well, it's not my business, or keeping secrets from people when they know that a woman is in danger. Yeah, that kind of thing. The consent law reform, that needs to get cracking. With, you know, society's done our bit, Labour and Help have done their bit. Now it's time for the government to step up. And also I hope the government don't just use this as a way to kind of make themselves look good to get a vote. Like, I hope that they actually genuinely care. Yeah, because sadly what we know is that there probably are victim survivors in Parliament, and perpetrators probably too. So yeah, but we need to change. It's so outdated. Another thing too that really grinds my gears is media responsibility. So when I say media responsibility, things like clickbait, you know, so say, for example, with this campaign, it goes up on the media, and then the Herald will go, oh, we're going to take this, and we're going to say, Taane's missus is against perpetrators, or, you know, but they use specific titles to you know, to get their clicks up. So I think more responsibility on media. And also another thing that upsets me is how they leave the comment section on for stuff like this. They'll take it off for, I don't know, something else that's like to do with someone's cat eating a piece of cheese or something. But then, I don't know. But then topics like this, because it does spark such a like, they leave the comment sections on there and they're not moderated. So therefore we have people that may be in a space wanting to get help. They see article or whatever, and then they read the comments and it's like, well, she shouldn't have done this. So then that's that barrier to prevent people from reaching out to get help. So I think, yeah, just more safety, you know. In terms of societal response as well, is, so I do consent education or I deliver and co-facilitate consent education in schools, secondary schools. And what we know is that a lot of parents and some teachers are not too happy about it. So some schools we can't get into because it goes against their beliefs, but they are still part of our community and our society. So what we need is society to be more open-minded and understand and be real about the stuff. The statistics, the research, and the people don't lie. This stuff is happening every day, you know, and we need our young ones to be the new generation that comes through to go, this isn't okay, and I'm going to be there for my friends. I'm going to make sure consent is given and received at all parts and stages, regardless of religion, regardless of culture, regardless, you know, all that stuff. So I think we need to be real, and consent education needs to be compulsory in schools. Yeah.
And do you have any advice for anyone who has been sexually abused and needs support?
Yes, I do. First of all, it's not your fault. It's never your fault, but your healing journey is your responsibility. So we can't take what happened to us and make it go away. It's always going to be there, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. Unfortunately, when you are ready, you need to, I encourage you to seek support, however that might look, whether that's, you know, with a free service. You can ring help, you can ring Safe to Talk, you can contact your doctor, you can go through ACC sensitive claims, you can go privately, and remember that this is all confidential as well, given circumstances. If you're an adult, if you're a child, then if you are immediate danger, then there will be other people that need to become involved to support you on your journey. But yeah, and I think too, it's never too late and it's never too early to get support either. So however you're feeling, and if you're wanting to make a change, then that's all you need. You just need to be ready. Yeah, and hang in there. It's a long journey. It's painful, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're wrapping up our last couple of questions, just bringing it to our current Do Something Helpful in May campaign that we're running. So the purpose of that is just really to get people to do something positive for themselves, for others, or the environment. So with the added kind of hopefully bonus of raising further awareness and funding for our services, but also further awareness for sexual abuse survivors as well, and how we can help. So why do you think it's an important initiative to get behind?
Yeah, I think it's important because we are all, as a whole society and community and country, we're all responsible to create change. So it's not just, it doesn't just fall on one group of people, it's everybody. And I think that these campaigns are really important because it raises awareness and helps other people to see what supports are available out there. And yeah, like, because I've been through it, I kind of have a good knowledge of what's out there. And someone who may have not been assaulted or harmed may in the future, which we kind of don't want to happen. We're trying to prevent that from happening. But at least they know where to go if it does arise, because it's better to have the tools on board to be prepared and equipped, not only to help yourself, but your friends and your family members as well. Because what we do know as well is that youth and people are more likely to tell their friends about an incident that's happened than anybody else first. So it's a lot to carry as a friend or a support person. So also for them to know that they can also access help to help them through this journey if they're worried about a friend. Yeah. And also obviously prevention is key. Like, I love working in the prevention space, love educating, even though a lot of people kind of cringe at the thought of it. I think that it's really, really important. And I wish that I had this at school. I really do. Even though youth cringe every time we go into the schools, and and they get really annoyed that we're there and they're taking up their PE time. But I'm like, if I can plant a seed in at least one person's mind, then I've done my job. Yeah.
So last question that I've got for you for today, Rachel. So what are you going to do something helpful this year?
Cool. So I thought long and hard about this one, and obviously I do consent education and using my social media platform to educate more around consent and healthy relationships. So me and my husband are going to do some role play stuff, but it's okay. Consent is not only romantic, intimate things, so don't freak out, people. We're going to do some more education stuff on my social media, and if you know me, I really struggle with making things like that. It takes me bloody ages. So and also for me, like I talked about, is boxing for me, and exercise is a huge part of recovery, or was a huge part of my recovery. So I'm going to be going to make sure that I exercise, whether that's boxing or even just getting out for a walk every day of the week for the rest of May. So we are away in Australia for a week soon, but I'll make sure that I do some sort of exercise while I'm away as well. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
And it's so much harder as well as it gets into winter. Pardon?
I think I've already fundraised $50.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. So yeah. Cool.
Thank you. And thank you very much for sharing your story, and also it's just so awesome what you've turned such a horrible horrific experience, and what you've turned that into in your life now, and what you're doing, and as a social worker, and informing others about the importance of consent. And so I just wanted to thank you very much for that, Kōrero.
Thank you. Thanks.